Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and writers and editors and journalists and sports writers and sportscasters. I say that advisedly because this evening we are going to speak with somebody who's a friend of mine. He is a Sirius XM update anchor, a writer for New York Sport, nysportsday.com. My longtime Bronx buddy, Howie Karpin. Nice to see you, Howie.
We've done this a lot of times, and it's always a thrill to come back on with you on
It's a
Bronx
thrill.
Buzz.
Well, that's because as I just told our producer Anderson Peguero, you and me, we could sit here for 3 hours talking about this stuff. Anyway, I want to get right to it. This book that it's coming out now. When is this coming out?
On April 24th.
All right, it's coming out. This is how sports phone launched careers and broke new ground. People who are much younger than you and I will say, "Wait a minute, sports phone? What is that?" And you did a full book on it. What I am just blown away. First of all, let's start here. It is brilliant to find something that happened and write a story about something that was so significant that frankly nobody knows about. And so congratulations on that. But now I'm going to read this list of, this is only a sample list of all the people who worked at Sports Phone and were part of this incredible project. And then you're going to take it away and tell us all about it. So Gary Cohn, who's obviously one of the great sportscasters of all time, Steve Cangelosi, John Giannone, Don LaGreca, Bob Papa, Howie Rose, Kenny Albert, Joe Benigno, Ed Coleman, Jeff Garland. That was a surprise. That, of course, is the guy who was on Curb Your Enthusiasm all this time. Bill James, who is a brilliant historian of sports. Chris Mad Dog Russo, who is, of course, legendary in broadcasting. Dave Sims, Susan Waldman, I know who you still call friends. All of those people worked at Sports Phone. And now, of course, they've gone on, and there are many others, including Howie Karpin. What was Sports Phone? Tell people who don't know.
Well, first of all, let me clarify. That list contains people who were connected. They either worked there or they were callers or they had some connection
Okay,
to
that's
Sports
fair.
Phone. That was part. And let me just credit my co-author, Scott Orgera, who did a fabulous job writing his parts in the book, and he designed the format and the cover, and just a talented guy, a terrific writer, and he's great on computer design. And it was basically his idea because it's kind of split up into two entities. One, the whole Sports Phone thing where people worked and called, and also how Sports Phone was kind of the pioneer to what we have today on your cell phones, access to scores, immediate access. And now let me go into what Sports Phone was.
Yes.
For the young people that don't realize, you could call up a number and get actual sports updates to the minute. When you called, we updated every 10 minutes the scores, or if there was news breaking, that was there as well. A lot of news stories during the day when there were no scores, but it was the access to the scores that nobody had. All you had was really the radio updates at every half hour, maybe on quarter two and a quarter after the hour, but there was no other access. There was no ESPN, ticker, none of that, no WFAN. That was your way to get the scores. And so many people, I didn't realize that so many people relied on it over the years.
It's just incredible to even conceive of it for people who now they go to their phone. You want to know what the Pirates and Cardinals are doing. I mean, in those days, as you said, you got to get lucky and get, like on WCBS radio, if they're running down all the scores, there was no way to get that information. Now, what years was this?
Well, it started in 72, but it actually took off in 75, and it lasted until about 2000. I worked there from 1980 to 1992. And on a personal level, I mean, that's what jump-started my career. I worked at Sports Phone, and that's how I got started in sports media. So I've been in sports media since 1980 when I began at Sports Phone.
You're also an author of books as well. You've written several books, but you are one of the official scorers of Major League Baseball. And so I know it's a joy. We had this pleasure over the weekend to sit next to you at a ball game, and you can actually tell us, was it a hit or an error? Exactly what the heck is going on in the ball game. So let's just add that to your credit. But it's inconceivable to the modern era that none of that information was available. So what did you guys do? You sat in an office and I would say you had computers. I mean, how did you get the scores and have them available for sports phone?
Well, we used the phone. Believe it or not, we used to. Well, we had stringers set up at each game to call in every 10 minutes.
Wow.
We also made calls to places where we didn't have stringers, and that was especially prominent during like college basketball to get those scores in Oklahoma or Kansas and places like that. So it was a combination of things. So we had steady stringers in certain markets. For example, a guy named Carl Bean in Boston, he should rest in peace. He passed away. He would call in Red Sox and Patriots and Celtics and Bruins. And we had stringers in Detroit and Chicago where we had other sports phone offices. They had their own stringers at some of the games. So we had a network of stringers, and also we made phone calls to get updates from scores. So it was a constant process while the scores were going on of updating every 10 minutes. Now on NFL Sunday, we went to a 2-minute update schedule, which was wild because we had to bring in 4 anchors for each hour. You would work 15-minute shifts on the hour. You do one tape, which took a minute, and then you come out, you try and get your scores, and you go right back in.
I mean, you look at the ticker at the bottom of any NFL game, the thing is going constantly. Now, when somebody called, did they get a recording? Did they get one of you? And they said, like, hey, again, I'll use the Pirates and Cardinals. What's going on in the Pirates and Cardinals game? Or how did it work when you picked up the phone? What did you get?
You got the recording of whoever put that recording in until it changed, 10 minutes later. It used to be on a thing called a loop, where you'd have to wait for it. It was almost like Arlo Guthrie in that song. You had to wait for it to come around.
Yeah, coming around again.
Update,
Yeah.
right? But then they modernized it to where you dialed in a number and then you dialed in some codes and then you hit like I think an asterisk and gave you a cue beep. And when the beep was over, you went. Now, the tape was 59 seconds and change, but we had to say your name in the beginning, and sometimes we promoted another line where we had to move scores or had news. So you really ended up with about 51 seconds of score time reporting the scores. It was a trick to get in as many scores as you could to be legible, to hear it and understand what the numbers were. And we went fast, admit it.
Howie, it's just looking at the modern day, it's just incredible. Now we're recording this, and the only other person who's watching this recording is my producer, Anderson Peguero. Anderson is a big San Diego Chargers fan. He can't. I'm just telling you, he's not on with us, but he can't imagine trying to follow the San Diego Chargers from New York in those days when he would have to pick up the phone to find out what the score was. It's crazy.
It's remarkable. I mean, I found it remarkable when I started working there. I wasn't even really a caller before I started working there. And then, here I was working there and putting the scores on, and I was a sportscaster. I mean, it was a dream of mine to, be doing sports. And here I had my opportunity. I had no connections when I started in the business, and luckily got hired thanks to some, things that happened in my career. And, we took off from there, and then people got to know you. And I'll be honest with you, I was very flattered that people recognized me, when talking about it. And even some of my colleagues, I didn't realize that the impact that, we had on certain people,
Wow.
even in the business.
It is just incredible. Now, the writing of the book, did you remember all this off the top of your head? Or listen, I can't remember what I did in 1980, I promise you. Or did you have to go back and do some researching? Are there any tapes of anything that still exist? Or is it all just in the air of history?
Well, in the back of the book, we have pictures, but we didn't really find any audio from the past. At least I didn't have any audio. But most of the stories were, most of it was off the top. The people we interviewed had their own stories. it's
Wow.
just my stories. It's the people that work there and the
Right, right.
experiences they had. We tried to split it up. Scott, my co-author, worked on the other side of the business, the impact it had elsewhere, into the digital age with some of the competition, and that end of it. I worked on it from the sports phone end of it because I experienced that firsthand.
Could we do a call right now? Okay, here I am dialing 976-1313. Do you remember how to do it? Can you do it?
Yeah, Howie Karpin for Sports Phone, 976-2525 for more scores and breaking news. Then we go right into the scoreboard.
There you go.
And then it was the out cue was "Stay with us," which
That's
became a catchphrase.
so the book will be out, what'd you say, April
24th.
24th? And all sports fans should check it out because this is a piece of history. What about the writing of the book? I mean, did it flow easy? Was this one of those pulling teeth kind of experiences, or did you feel like, wow, I'm telling a story that people should hear?
No, it was very easy to write this
Really?
stuff, and the way my co-author formatted it, it's a very easy read. There's a lot in there. I mean, it's it's over 400 pages.
Really?
It's an easy read the way Scott formatted it, with separating the paragraphs and things like that, and the pictures that we put in there, those drawings, for the stories. We have there used to be a thing called the Quickie Quiz that we used to run as a promo twice a day, and the caller who got the first one with the answer would get their name on sports phone. And Kenny Albert, that's his connection to the book. He was one of the most frequent callers when he was younger.
Wow, Marv Albert's son.
Albert's son, who's now a good friend, and he wrote the foreword on the book. So we had a little section of Quickie Quiz tied into some of the stories with the sports phone personnel.
Crazy. Last question. Howie, by the way, is going to be with us for both segments because we're going to talk baseball right after this and welcome the 2024 season as we do every year. A big moment that you remember reporting on Sports Phone, or they were all big moments because you reported everything.
Probably the day that Magic Johnson revealed he had AIDS. If you read the story in there, one of my colleagues, when we heard that Magic Johnson was giving a presser, one of my colleagues said that I actually guessed, off the top that it was AIDS.
Wow. Because it was so big at that time.
That was a very big story.
Listen, Howie, we're going to take a short break. Then you and I are going to come back and do what we love to do, and that's talk baseball. We'll be right back.
This year, BronxNet Community Television needs your support. For more than 30 years, we've been providing community programming shows, education courses, and access to our world-class television studios, a place where Bronx residents can call home. Community leaders and organizations can share their ideas, stories, and passions for what matters to us. We are still going strong, working hard each day, building new studios, creating new jobs, and expanding our digital inclusion opportunities so that your voices can still be heard. Every dollar counts. Donate to BronxNet and keep the momentum going and continue building a better Bronx with BronxNet.
Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. We didn't break up the show with two different segments today, with two different guests today, because Howie Karpin, the Sirius XM update anchor, a writer for NewYorkSportsDay.com, official scorer for Major League Baseball, he knows it all. And so, with the beginning of the baseball season, we figured we'd check in and find out what's going on with our Yankees and Mets. Let's just start with the news that popped out yesterday about John Sterling. The Yankees, a longtime announcer, has said he's retiring right away, like today. What do you know? What do you want to tell us about the legacy of John Sterling?
Well, end of an era, obviously, and I was fortunate enough to interact with John a number of times, and he was nice to me on the air. And when I got the scoring job at the new stadium, John would leave the ballpark and always walk by my chair, and if I was there, we'd chat a little, and he'd always say goodbye and good night. And as I said, the end of an era. I didn't really listen. Once he started, I was already in the business 9 years. So I go back to even before him. So I really didn't, I didn't really have the impact that he had on a lot of fans, over the years. But it was a pleasure to interact with him and be around him. And, I wish him the best in retirement. He's a good guy, really nice person. And I wish him all the best.
Yankees got off to a great start this year. Maybe we should ask, why was it such a good start? And then what are the pratfalls that you're concerned about as the Yankees go through their season?
Well, I've been on with you for years, and you remember I always told you about balance, left-hand hitters, which they haven't had until this season when they added one of the best in Juan Soto, who impacts. People do not realize, especially the analytical people, the impact of presence in the lineup. It reverberates like an earthquake graft, an epicenter throughout the lineup, and he's had that impact. So now
from the first day, literally the first day. Yeah,
right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They have Soto now from the left side, Alex Verdugo from the left side, or Oswaldo Cabrera from the left side. It negates the right. First of all, you play percentages. The righties overmatch righties, and a lot of right-handed pitchers don't want to pitch to left-hand hitters. Now, you saw that in the opening series against the Astros. Remember, 2 years ago in the ALCS, the Astros wouldn't even employ a left-hand reliever on their roster. They only had one lefty pitcher, and that was Framber Valdez. They had no fear of the Yankee right-hand hitters because they knew they could overmatch them. Now, you saw the big difference. What happens when you have lefties in the lineup? You got to have balance in your lineup.
And now they finally have it. You believe that they have it.
They have it a lot more than they've had in years.
So the other part of the game, of course, is pitching. Where are the Yankees at? To me, the way it's looked, and I haven't followed that closely, but it's been kind of like this, but with some good spots. You had a good start from Nelson Cortez the other day.
Yeah, it's been a little up and down starting wise, but it's not as bad as people think, and they're hoping to get Gary Cole back. He's been starting to throw from 60 feet 6 inches a little bit. That's a big loss. If they can navigate their way through this early part of the season, get him back, they'll be in pretty good shape. They once again have a pretty decent bullpen. Over the years, they've managed to build their bullpen with pretty good arms, and that seems to be the case again. So, I mean, look, everybody's got flaws with their pitching. No one has a complete pitching staff. You try and manage and navigate, the regular season, get into the playoffs, and take your chances. And the Yankees are much improved this year than last season.
The biggest challenge in the division, I'm guessing the Orioles. They're young, they're healthy. Those guys are athletic. They can do a lot of different things. They can beat you a lot of different ways. Is that how you see the division?
Absolutely. That's the way it's shaping up. It seems to be it's going to be either the Yankees or the Orioles. Toronto has a severe lack of balance in their lineup. They're predominantly right-handed. The Red Sox are not that great this year. And then, and Tampa Bay is Tampa Bay, although, they're lacking in a lot of areas, but you never count them out. But it certainly seems it's going to be the Orioles and the Yankees in the East.
What I know it's impossible at this point to look at the mid-season. What do you think at a trading deadline? What do you think the Yankees would look for, or does it really just depend on what happens? I mean, there'll be injuries. I mean, things could happen that you need to fill holes, or is there a hole right now that you think, come July 31st, they're going to need to fill?
I think it's a combination of both. See what happens, and I think their bench could be enhanced a little bit. Right now, that
Yes.
they've been a little weak defensively at certain places, although I think that'll get better. Anthony Rizzo's made some errors. He's not that bad a fielder. I think it would be the bench and maybe adding maybe another starter if possible, or a bullpen arm when it comes down to the deadline.
Listen, everybody's going to need arms. That's the nature of the game. All right, let's go to Queens and let's talk about the Mets. They started out abysmally, but up to where we're at right now, they reached 500 last night. What do you think? Where are they going?
Well, I had them making the playoffs before the year. A lot of people think I'm out of my mind, but
Not me.
don't forget, if you look at last year, what they
Yeah.
didn't have, they didn't have Edwin Diaz. They had no Starling Marte whatsoever. Their pitching was in shambles. Their team, it was crippled by the injuries. They had to be improved, and now you got a year under your belt with Brett Beatty, who's showing a lot of progress. Francisco Alvarez is a really good, addition to that lineup. He's going to hit, and give you stability behind the plate. Their team is not as bad as it appeared to be when they started the season. Alonso's contract is going to be a story, but he's off to a pretty good start. Lindor's starting to come around. He wasn't going to hit 093. So, again, them also with the bench, they're going to need to enhance that and maybe add another arm in the bullpen and certainly a starter. So they're in the same boat as a lot of other teams. I see them being right in the mix.
Do you think they got enough pitching, starting pitching in particular? Every time one of those guys goes out, to me they all look like number 3 starters. I don't see anybody emerging as a legitimate number 1 starter.
Yeah, that's a good analysis. But they have a couple of young arms in the minors that might end up helping them this year. Christian Scott and the kid Vassell. So again, you go along in the early part. There's people. It's true you can't win in April, but you can lose in April. If you have a very bad April and May, you're going to be gone. Look what happened to them last year. So the fact that they've righted themselves here at this point, 16 games in, is big. Now you want to try and build and get over 500 as much as possible, and then take your chances in the second half.
A lot of people were concerned about the manager, Carlos Mendoza, with little experience. Of course, good experience, on the Yankees bench. Do you have a read on how well he's doing at this early point in the season, or is it too early to really get a feel for how he wants to manage a baseball game?
Well, let me just first say that the previous manager is a friend of mine, so I'm a little biased, and I thought he got a raw
A lot
deal.
of fans are biased as well, but
Yeah,
okay.
I thought he got a raw deal. Now, Carlos Mendoza's come in. He's a communicator. That's what they're saying. You got to, so far, so good. You got to give it a chance. He's made some good moves. He's made some questionable moves. That's the nature of the beast. It's always going to be, you're always going to be criticized. But if you win, certainly people are going to be pleased.
Nobody will care. That's right.
So far, so good. You can't really get a good read on it until you see him go through a whole season.
I really thought he just had a bit of bad luck that they had that issue with Rhys Hoskins on the very first game, that decisions had to be made about how to deal with that kind of tension and competition, literally in the first game for a rookie manager. That is a tough thing to ask a guy who's kind of a little starry-eyed managing his first major league game.
Yeah, let me say something about that too, because a lot of people thought Luis Severino should have threw at Hoskins the next day. Luis Severino is trying to resurrect his career. He was making his Met debut. To expect him to police that issue was really unfair. And then the kid Yohan Ramirez ended up doing it later on. Now everyone's quick to say, "Oh, you got to throw at him. You got to do this." You get out on the mound and try and throw at a guy. See how easy it is. Everyone's an armchair manager, a quarterback. It's not that easy. It's a difficult situation. People say, "Oh, they hit the Mets all these years." So Pete Alonso stands on the inside of the plate, so he's going to get hit by pitches. Guys like that get hit. It's not because they're throwing at them on purpose. So it doesn't make sense to really start any trouble. You pick your spots in that situation.
And I appreciate what you said about Severino in that game, in his first game, because it's not only that you got to hit him and then maybe deal with somebody charging the mound. He get thrown out of the game, and it's the guy's worked his way back, and all of a sudden the first game he ends up pitching 2 innings. That's not going to help where he's at.
Yeah, well,
and for him, that's much more important.
People made an assumption that he wouldn't get thrown out. How do you know that?
Oh, goodness.
If the umps they don't have to issue a warning. They can throw you out if they think intent. So, yeah, that would have screwed up their whole pitching staff if he got thrown out in an inning.
Not to mention his career to, not be able to get started. You mentioned earlier about the Alonso contract. My feeling is that they should simply just the heck with, Scott Boras or any of that. Go out and sign the guy. You're not going to find a better first baseman, total package, team player, guy who hustles, certainly leads all of baseball in home runs the last 5 years, than Pete Alonso. Why don't you sign him? I'm missing why delay. That's my issue.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know how high this new regime is on Alonso. I mean,
Really?
he is up there, and he's going to be 29, 30 years old.
30 years old.
He's not the most athletic guy out there, but again, it's presence. His presence in the lineup reverberates throughout. Now, he's an average fielder. He's not that great. He's not a Gold Glover, but I'll tell you one thing: he works at it. He comes out before the game, and he's out there taking infield. So, and he cares. I mean, he's a good guy. And he's well liked in the clubhouse, despite some media outlets reporting that he was toxic.
I couldn't even understand that.
Nonsense.
I couldn't even understand that at all. It didn't seem to make sense to me. All right, listen, we got about a minute left. You want to pick the 6 division winners?
No.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm so sorry I put you on the spot.
That's all right. I don't like predictions.
All right, fair enough.
You know the old saying, they're a crapshoot.
So you do like the Mets in the playoffs, possibly a wild card.
I think we'll see both of them in the playoffs, Yankees and the Mets.
Yankees and the Mets, Rangers.
I'm looking forward to it. They got.
I meant the New York Rangers, not the Texas Rangers.
Yeah, I know the New York Rangers.
Okay.
Yeah, they have a real shot if they clean up their bad habits of trying to make plays out of their own zone and messing around with the east-west passes near the blue line. I think they clean that up. They can beat anybody in the field.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you. Listen, Howie Karpin, it's a joy to be your friend. It's a joy to be your broadcast colleague, and it's always a joy to have you on any time we can have a conversation on TV about what we love. Thank you so much. Regards to Kathy, and we'll see you around town, I'm sure.
You don't know how much I appreciate your support and your friendship. It's really
great.
Awesome.
Listen, let's get that book out there, folks. It is 976-1313. That was how Sports Phone launched careers and broke new ground. Thanks to Scott Orgera and Howie Karpin. And I guess that's it. If the curtain don't fall, the creek don't rise. We'll see you next week. Good night.